Well, it's been a little while since I did the last videos, and I've been trying to put my thoughts down um, and remain relevant to cover a fairly broad of range of topics. It's not meant to be a go-to Bible or all things caravanning, but it's just observations of various ways of addressing caravan travel. And I'm going to put in some old vision here from previous trips just to break. Well, we've got a huge choice of vans that people are looking at and want to go off on their trips, and it doesn't matter what you have in mind. There's a huge range. You've got hybrids, pop tops, full height vans, single axle, dual axle, on-road, off-road, and take your pick. With all these choices available, it's still very difficult to choose one that does everything brilliantly, and compromises have to be made. It really is a minefield because the towing vehicle has to be part of the process as well. My personal choice ended up being a Jayco Journey Outback 1755 pop top, but that doesn't mean that other similar vans are less suitable. The thought process is still the same. My thinking was dual axle, independent suspension, low tear weight, suitable for two people and fairly well appointed, plus the fact you've got a service network Australia wide. Cost of course was another consideration. I've stuck with the Outback as having owned one once before. I was aware of the common problems suffered and how to mitigate them before they arise. I did have a Starcraft 19-foot on-road van for a short time because it was the only van available at the beginning of COVID. It was a nice van, full height but bitumen only, and not really what I needed, so I've come back to the second-hand Outback. My first Outback was a first fast learning curve. Inexperience was my biggest problem. Simple things like not lowering tyre pressures on the van for the dirt travel resulted in screws and the cupboards, doors under the microwave, the range hood all coming loose at will. Reducing the tyre pressures from the get-go would have saved a lot of anguish later on in the trip. Dust coming in from the wheel arches and under the fridge was another source of grief. The overhead cupboards also tried to relocate, but these problems aren't necessarily confined to a particular van, as most vans will have issues of one kind or another. This van proved to be a reliable friend once we got to know each other. Trips were taken through the Murchison to Mount Augustus and the Pilbara, then across both the Gibb River Road and the Great Central Road without drama once preventative maintenance had been done. I think having a low operational weight and keeping this speed down is the secret to this sort of touring. Dual axle as opposed to single axle, quite a bit of debate about that. I myself think that having four wheels to share the weight and stability wins. Lower tyre pressures and the tyres only working at 60% of their load rating is also fairly healthy. A lot of single axle and semi and off-road vans are working at the top end of their performance, especially those with a ATM of over 2,800 kilos, and all the ratings that you get when you buy a van and tyres and all sorts come with the proviso under ideal conditions. Outback travel in Australia does not come close to ideal conditions, so you've got to look after your gear. Independent suspension, leaf sprung load sharing. I think that depends on where you envisage travelling and what road surfaces you're going to be on. There's nothing wrong with leaf spring suspension. They usually track very well, and by and large are easy to maintain and service. They are robust as well, but the corrugations transmit van destroying vibrations to the inside components of your van. Independent suspension is softer and combined with lower tyre pressures does offer some relief, but this doesn't mean you can go hell for leather. Speed restraint is still your best tool to protect your van. Speed, heat and weight are the enemy. Keeping your gross weight down is also important. The lighter your van is, the less fuel you're going to use. Fuel costs alone are eye-watering. The average towing platform tank of the utes and the mid SUVs are about 75 litres and usually gives a range of about 400 k's. Aftermarket tanks are available, and that's okay, but you've got a weight penalty there, and along with any modifications like a wedge bull bar, extra tyres. All of a sudden the fuel economy is gone and your GVM is impacted. Where possible, take only the necessities depending on your destination. Solo travel, or solo remote travel rather, needs careful planning, and there's a temptation to load up with just in case stuff. So travelling with other parties and sharing resources is a good alternative. Frequent inspections are important as well. When you first start looking at vehicles or changing vehicles, it's most important that you look at all the GVMs, your ATM, GCM. Most of the dual cabs have a GCM of around about 6,000 kilograms. The Ranger tops it all out with about 6.2, and some of the lesser varieties are down to 5.5. Depending on the manufacturer, it's pretty important to go and look at what the figures are. Probably the most important spec is the rear axle limits. They vary quite a lot between manufacturers and are very easily exceeded. So don't fall for the assumption that the tow ball weight on you of 200 kilograms will only add that amount to your tow vehicle, because the cantilever effect of the 200 kilograms on your tow ball takes the weight off the front axle and transfers it to the rear axle and increases the load by quite significantly. It's probably upwards of probably 100 kilos extra above the 200 kilos. That pulls weight off your front axle, of course, so it's just a thing that you've got to be aware of. Now, just because the manufacturers state GVMs, GCMs and GTM figures, it doesn't mean that you should try and attempt the maximum limits, especially if you intend to buy an off-road van and take it bush. Once you're off the bitumen, physics and traction come into play. You can have all the power and torque in the world, but unless you've got traction, it's a stalemate. A steep incline out of a floodway on an unsealed road with a loose surface might only be 15-20 metres, but lots of traction will stop you dead. Suddenly the day has turned to crap and you've got to improvise to get out of the situation. This may involve letting your water go or saving it in containers so you can put it back in the tanks, unloading the van, letting your tyres down on the tow vehicle, winching if you have a winch, and B, if you've got something to winch off, dropping the caravan and scull drag it from a better traction service, divorce, or waiting for Ronnie to turn up in his cruiser. Travelling lighter and not asking too much of your vehicle is way less stressful. Of course, the picture changes once again for the families that are taking a couple of gap years to tour Australia. Immediately we're talking about larger, heavier vans, to accommodate the physical demands of having a couple of extra bodies on board. Not having travelled with kids, I'm not really in a position to comment or give advice. Choosing a tow platform that offers an option of both on-demand and locked four-wheel drive is not a bad idea. Travelling on unsealed roads in four-wheel drive is recommended, and having an on-demand system lessens the risk of transmission wind-up and damage. There's the added benefit of being able to drive on high traction surfaces all the time and in the wet. Fuel stops and coffee breaks offer an opportunity to do a quick walk around, glance at the tyres and feel the wheel hubs. Tyre pressure monitoring systems are a sound investment. The better ones monitor both pressure and temperature and can be set to minimum pressure and maximum temperatures, and that gives off an audible or a visual warning. The temperature warning is really handy if you have a dodgy wheel bearing, as they start to get hot, the heat transfers to the tyre, and so the alarm goes off. Even if the handbrake hasn't been fully released, there is a little drag. There's enough to warn the brake drum and wheel hub and send the tyre off on the alarm. Don't forget the temperature. Don't set the temperature alarm too low, say 60 degrees Celsius, as road surface temperatures are enough to trigger them, as I found out in the Kimberleys. In regard to having all this technology, it really opens a can of worms. The new vans now come with a complete electrical monitoring system that can be accessed off your phone, and is the norm now, and it's magical what the information is available without getting out of your chair while having a drink around the campfire. Lightweight lithium batteries are all the rage because they can deliver more power and for less weight. You can now run an inverter to run your microwaves, coffee machines, air fryers, power tools, to name a few. You've got to ask whether you really need them. Apart from being expensive, it's also adding weight and maybe opening the reliability can of worms. Unless you're really across this new technology, if it goes wrong, what do you do? The same applies to the modern motor vehicles. Gone are the days when if you had a problem, it was nearly always someone who had experienced a similar situation, and a temporary fix can be made to get you underway to the next service centre. Keeping it simple as you can is all I can say. My Starcraft had a modern setup and let me down because I didn't understand the consequences of having a flat house battery. The system needed a 12-volt battery charged up to activate the BMS charging protocols from a 240 outlet. The battery needed to be charged from an independent source to wake it up and then start receiving charge. I didn't find this out until after I'd purchased a new battery, because I thought the original battery had collapsed and it wouldn't receive a charge from a 240 volt power plug. It only goes to show that you're never too old to stop learning. The other thing I did learn was I didn't need to have what I didn't need was having to use the phone to turn the power, water pump and light circuits on. Sure, it was very trendy, but not necessarily efficient. So the best idea is to keep it simple. Come to breakdowns. What do you do if you break down on the road? It's somewhere sort of half remote. Keeping your vehicles in tip-top condition is a must, and knowing and having some basic mechanical skill is advisable. Towing very quickly exposes any shortfalls that aren't apparent when driving unhitched. For example, overheating, that's the main one. Having premium roadside assistance package is almost mandatory. The manufacturer's warranties with free roadside assist are only usually available for if you're within 100 k's of a service centre and you're responsible to get the vehicle to the closest dealer at your cost. Always read the fine print before you set off. The bare minimum to take away with you on any trip is a full set of fan belts, radiator hoses and small toolkit. Even if you don't know how to change them, at least you have them for someone else to fit. Once you've left suburbia, not all towns have service centres that carry individual spares relative to your vehicle. If you are driving an older vehicle, have it checked thoroughly for worn belts, hoses and brakes, tyres and batteries well before leaving. Get into the habit of checking the oil and water each morning before starting off, especially on the first few days, to see if there is any change or increase in oil in consumption or loss of water. Oil can be replenished, but water loss needs further investigation to ascertain where the loss is occurring. The cooling system has lots of sneaky ways of leaking, starting with a dud pressure cap, a loose hose clamp or a water pump being the worst scenario. Losing water never self-rectifies, and a sudden loss is usually terminal. Don't be complacent, and just because it was alright yesterday doesn't mean that today will be okay. Every morning check the ground under the vehicle and in front of the caravan or trailer. Covered in dust are easy to see. This small specks land on the back of the car and the van and end up in the dust. They're quite easy to quite visible. This could indicate oil loss from the engine, transmission or diff. There's not a lot you can do except monitor the situation until you get to a service centre for advice. So that winds up this video. Not a lot more I can add. Could go on forever, of course. If you like this content, give it a like, subscribe or whatever, pass it on. These are just my thoughts. It's not anything outstanding, or it's just an idea of how I view things, basically. And all I can say is safe travelling out there, and good luck with any purchases you do make, and I hope you enjoy what we all like doing.